Hey everybody on YouTube. This video is about Arch Linux on a Transmeta Crusoe CPU. The Arch Linux kernel is an i686 kernel compiled with the O2 flag. That's going to cause lots of problems with the Transmeta since it doesn't support floating points. So what I have done is patch the kernel to use some of the AMD Geode patches. I put it in different places of the kernel source, of course. And I also patched the kernel so that it would be recognized as a full i686 CPU with no exceptions. So I gave it emulation capabilities of an i686 CPU and patched it to be so. And as you see here, I'm going to turn on the tablet and we'll watch it go through a normal Arch Linux boot sequence. As you see, well, as you will see, it's still a very base system. Of course, there is no window manager or anything. It's just a console right now. But the point is, it is completely supported now. So at this point, I could do whatever I feel like doing with it. Of course, running very modern KDE packages with Compiz Fusion and such is not going to be very efficient on this machine because it's somewhat older. But here it is going through the normal routine. The issue with having this O2 flag is glibc primarily. At this stage in time, it has to be compiled with O2. If it isn't compiled with O2, if it's compiled with OS, which this CPU actually requires, you'll run into errors during compilation because it forces the O2 flag. And this is actually much better because instead of recompiling your entire tree of repository stuff, you can just use the normal repositories. Let me run a couple commands so I can show the details of this machine. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is run uname mr. As you see, I have the custom kernel, and it's reporting itself as an i686 processor. The nice thing about i686 is Pacman, it wants to look at uname r to check and see which architecture you're running. With the normal kernel, it's going to recognize the CPU as an i586 up until it crashes. But because this has full support for i686 now, Pacman is going to recognize the architecture's i686 and sync with the local mirrors. So the standard packages are absolutely supported in this version. Something I think you might find interesting too my screen isn't big enough. Okay, so as you see here, it says genuine x86, CPU family 6. The 6 promotes it to an i686 CPU, which isn't the Transmeta, but because it's patched, it supports the CPU family 6. And as you see, the system is very stable. It does not have any stability issues from what I can tell, and it's completely supported. So from here on, I'm going to build up this tablet like a normal Arch Linux installation that I usually do, and keep maintaining kernel 26 Crusoe. That's what it's called, kernel 26-Crusoe. It's going to be in the AUR, and in a comment in the AUR, I'm also going to leave a binary package available too. That way you don't have to compile a whole kernel, you can just download it and run it. And the kernel 26 Crusoe package, it was built with provides equals kernel 26, saying that it provides kernel 26. So as you see here, I'm using the normal Linux firmware module and all the other normal kernel stuff, except for kernel 26 Crusoe. It is entirely backwards compatible. So get that thing installed after a base installation of Arch Linux. Reboot, you should be absolutely good. Oh, one more thing I should mention too. I know you know this, but for all the other people who are still getting started, make sure, whoops, what'd I do there? Oh, whoops. I do that every once in a while. Alright, make sure that you specifically set this kernel in your menu.list and grub. If you don't, it's not going to boot it, of course. But the changes are going to be right here, VM Linux liniz 26-crusoe, kernel 26-crusoe.img. And these two, the kernel and the initrd, those are going to be built by making it CPIO when you install the kernel automatically. But you have to update menu.list by yourself. It's also made to be also compatible with the normal kernel. You can install them both. They're not going to headbutt as far as files go. So there you go. I gave support for the Transmeta Crusoe to Arch Linux. I hope all you guys breathe some new life into your hardware. Take care, you guys.